Okay, so it looks like we've got Marilyn and Julie here. So if you two are ready, since you seem to be our participants tonight, I'm going to go ahead and get this started. Let me share my screen.
And Ryan, why don't you start off by introducing yourself and all that you do?
Absolutely, that's part of it. So, my name is Ryan Foley. I volunteer here sometimes. You might have seen me around, and I'm an attorney. So I focus in estate planning and special needs planning. That's pretty much my bread and butter. I'll do probate court too, although I'm not big into probate litigation. So if you've got something that's getting really complicated in litigation, I'm probably not going to take it. I'm going to hand you off to somebody I know who does it better than I do it. So never fear, if you ever come to me with anything legal that's not in my area, I will hand you off to somebody who knows what they're doing better than I know what I'm doing in that area. So I'm from Kansas City area. I've lived here my whole life, and you can kind of see here in the background. I'm the guy over on the left. You couldn't tell. That's my wife, Amy, right there next to me, and the rest of my family. And then on my right-hand side of the slides, you can see my two little ones. Tiernan is just turned a year and a half old, and then he is holding his baby sister, Cara. And I just thought it was very cute, so I thought I had to include it in my introduction of who I am. Now, if I go back a slide real quick, you'll see there's a little QR code for attendance. If you feel up to it, if you're comfortable doing it, you can hold up your phone at the end, not now, at the end, and do an attendance thing and answer a couple of questions that let me know if you want me to schedule a phone call with you or if you are looking at doing a consult or anything like that. But tonight's supposed to be educational. Tonight's not supposed to be about anything else. So if you just have questions as well, I have my phone number and I have my email listed at the end of the presentation again. And you are welcome to call me and ask me anything. And if I can answer it without giving legal advice, well, I'm going to answer it. If it crosses that border into legal advice, then I've got to start a client attorney relationship with you before I can tell you more. But if I can tell you without crossing that line, I'm going to let you know. So starting off tonight, I want to make sure that we're kind of speaking the same language on these things. Legalese, medicalese, governmentese, they're not English. A lot of the words that get bandied about in my profession and in talking about these topics aren't used in everyday speech. So if something gets too in the weeds or if I get too off track talking about something too complicated, just I can see you still on the camera. Just wave your hands at me and I will stop and I will slow down and I will tackle that. Now, the other thing I want to talk about on speaking the same language is also that special needs planning is pretty esoteric. Even amongst attorneys, even estate planning attorneys, not everybody knows what they're talking about when they're talking about these topics. Unfortunately, I've met a few families and I've talked to a few attorneys whose advice has been, oh, well, you just disinherit the kid. And that's the advice they give to make sure they don't kick their child off of public benefits, if they've even gotten that step done yet. Then that is not the right idea. That's not what you want to do. Don't disinherit any of your kids, whether it's your special needs or non-special needs children. Let's just build the plan around those necessities. Let's also, another issue that I see pretty often is getting the family set up for strife when you do this. Standard estate planning attorneys or general practitioners sometimes don't realize that maybe putting one of your children in charge of the other children can cause friction. And as we're heading towards Thanksgiving, I think we can all agree that if you are sitting down at the Thanksgiving table with your sibling and they're in charge of you, there might be a little friction at the table this week. So that's another thing that you have to drill down and find out in your situation what is going to work. And so that's a concern that has to be addressed in this planning. So another thing that I want to do while talking about legalese and medicalese and all of this is try and get on the same page from the jump So I'm going to hit some definitions here to start. And the biggest definition, I don't expect you to memorize what's on this slide. Just remember that Social Security is kind of the gold standard when it comes to what is the definition of disability. So if you look up the Code of Federal Regulations, they have this whole gobbledygook that you see on your screen right now that says, what is disability? And within it, they use other words that they don't define, and you have to go dig around and find the definitions elsewhere, like substantial gainful activity. Well, I think I know what that means when I hear it said, but what does the government mean when they're saying it? So looking at this, what this means is that if someone can work in the government's estimation and they can get enough profit from the work to meet a certain target that changes every year, it goes up and up, thankfully, not down, at least not yet. If you can make more than that, then you're not going to meet the definition of disability as far as Social Security is concerned. And Social Security is really the one we are concerned about. There are some exceptions and different rules if you're looking at blindness instead of a learning disability. But I'm going to do a lot of my talking tonight as though learning disabilities are the main core of what we're talking about. So we're not going to worry too much about SSDI exceptions or blindness exceptions. We're going to stick with if you can work and you can earn more than $1,600 roughly, then Social Security is not going to consider you to be disabled. So let's go ahead and talk about, okay, special needs trusts. This is what I'm talking about putting together. This is the main part of planning. What do I mean when I'm saying special needs trusts? So there's this technical definition. Once again, not expecting you to memorize the technical definition. You can see there's a little bit of italics on the screen. This is language from a court on a court case where they said, this is the definition of a special needs trust. And when they do it, they don't always call it a special needs trust. You'll see them called an OBRA trust or a supplemental needs trust or a purely discretionary trust, which doesn't actually work in Kansas but works on the Missouri side. There's a lot of names. The reality is what a special needs trust is a document, a whole big pile of papers with a bunch of instructions in it that meet the current federal guidelines so that you can preserve assets and still qualify to get benefits. Because you don't want someone to get an inheritance and then not be able to qualify. Or if you're looking down the road and it's your own money, you know you're going to need benefits in the future, you want to figure out, okay, how am I going to qualify for those? Again, you can set up a special needs trust to get there. And I suppose the trite answer is, if you are a parent, a guardian, or a spouse of someone with a special needs or someone who meets the definition of disability, the trust is going to be you when you're not here anymore. Or it's going to disseminate all of your duties, all the tasks that you've taken on, and say who's going to do what. That's the whole purpose of it. So we know what it is now. And why should we have one? And I think we've already started touching on that. Living as someone who meets the definition of disability is just more expensive than it is living as someone who doesn't meet that definition. And so we do want to preserve assets. That's our number one concern, is that government benefits only pay for certain things. You're only allowed to get them if you spend down almost all of your funds. And so what do we do if we need other care or other items that public benefits aren't going to pay for? Well, we need to save the money. That's why we should have one. The second reason is that you're not always going to be able to care for your loved one. And like I said on the last slide, if they're going to keep needing care and you're not always going to be here, the trust is going to take over your duties when you can't perform them anymore. And the third answer to this is not just anybody should be doing this job. You are very familiar with the ins and outs of what you do. You have learned all kinds of things about the medical diagnosis of your loved one and everything that goes into their care. And as a more broad example, we all know somebody who shouldn't handle money. We all know somebody who shouldn't be handling money. It is a difficult skill, and that's before we even get into anything like public benefits and dealing with SSI, SSDI, Medicaid, ABLE accounts, any of the grants that are out there. You want to be able to pick someone who's going to be responsible, who's going to understand and be capable of handling all of the financial ins and outs. And that comes down to picking a trustee for the trust. Now, we'll get to trustee concerns in a little bit. For now, I'm going to stop and talk about these financial concerns and the benefits real quickly. This is more of like the first slide suggested, a 101, because I could go in depth on a lot of these topics. So SSI is available to any who are disabled, but it is a means tested, which means they're going to say you can only have so much in assets, or you can only have so much in income, or they'll put restrictions on both. And if you don't meet those, you don't qualify, then you're not getting the benefit. Or if you meet it now, and for some reason that changes in the future, maybe you receive an inheritance, maybe you get a new job and now you're earning more money, then we're in trouble. Then you can lose those benefits. SSDI is for those who have been able to work and then become disabled. Most people who have SSDI are going to be people who have had some kind of accident or some kind of medical condition that has developed across their lifetime. Unfortunately, right now, you're limited to qualifying for this if you've had that incident before the age of 26. It's pretty cut off. However, in 2026, they're extending it to 46 years of age. So if you are someone who has had an accident at work that has left you meeting Social Security's definition of disability, you have until age 46 to apply for this coverage. And if you have worked enough, then you will qualify and receive payments. The next one is Medicaid. Medicaid funds a whole lot of programs. It is the largest one. It is the most complicated. It is also means-based. It is another one where if you have too much income or you have too many assets, they're not going to give you any benefits. And then ABLE is the last of the big dogs in here. ABLE accounts are wonderful things. We're very happy that we have them. But they're typically best in smaller situations, less amount of money. If you are not trying to leave a home for your children, maybe so that they can continue to stay in the same place, then sure, an ABLE account will be fine. But if you want to leave any more than $100,000 in value total to your child, ABLE account is not going to work. An ABLE account is limited to that maximum amount. You can only put in $17,000 a year. And if you go over that, there's penalties. So it's not worth it if you're looking at leaving any large assets to them. So I think it's pretty easy to agree, going back, that this can get complicated in a hurry. And talking about financial acumen, being able to handle these complexities, that's only going to become more true as we move on from finances into managing a trust. So what kinds of trusts are there? Again, you're going to hear when people talk about this or talk about their personal experiences and what they've done for their family, they'll throw a lot of words around. And most of the time, my experience has been people don't always know what they're talking about. They're just repeating bits and pieces of what they've heard. So I'm going to try and give it to you in basic form right now. A first party and a third party trust are the only two kinds of special needs trusts. They can be broken down into further categories, which you'll see in the blue and the green on the screen. But the first one up there, the purple box, first versus third party. And that just means first party is I made my trust for myself and I put my money in there. Let's say I'm driving and I get hit by a trucker and all of a sudden I am unable to work anymore. I cannot be substantially gainfully employed according to Social Security, and I get a settlement. The truck driving company had insurance. Insurance is paying out, and I've all of a sudden got a lump sum of $100,000. Well, I can't qualify for Social Security because I've got way too much in assets now. So I can take my money that I've received and open up a trust and put that money in it. And that's first party. Or say I've got MS. I've got a good friend who's an attorney who's got MS, and he's done, I think, this exact plan in place. He knows he's going to need more care. He knows that eventually he's going to have to receive skilled nursing until he passes away once he hits a certain point. And so he has made a first party special needs trust, knowing that in the future that care is going to be necessary. The other option is a third party special needs trust. This is actually way more common. This is I have a loved one who meets Social Security's definition of disability. And so I am making a trust for my loved one, and I am putting assets in it. Now, you don't have to be the only one. I could put assets in a trust for my son if he met that definition, and so could his grandparents, and so could his aunts and uncles, and so could a random stranger off the street. Anybody can put money into a third party special needs trust except the person who's benefiting. So you can wind up in a situation where someone has a first and a third party trust. They've used their money to make their own, but they couldn't put their money in the third party trust. Now, why would we want one versus the other? What's really the difference? The biggest, most important difference is that a third party trust doesn't have to pay back the state for public benefits that were given to that individual. First party does. So I get in that truck accident and I receive $100,000 settlement and I start receiving government benefits and I pass away and there's $20,000 left of the 100,000 when I pass. Well, in a first party trust, however much the government has paid in public benefits, my trust now has to pay them back. So if they paid 15,000, 15 of the 20 is gone. If they paid 500,000, well, then they get the 20 and they have to live with it because there's nothing left in the trust. But no matter how much is left in that trust, the government gets paid back every last penny they're owed up to the limit that's in the trust. Third party trust, no such rule. You, as the person who made the trust, you're not receiving any public benefits. So you don't have any kind of obligation to pay the government back. And so what you will do is say, this is for the benefit of my loved one. And when they don't need it anymore, here's where I want it to go. And that's where it's going to go. You can pick a charitable place. You can pick your other children. You can pick your dog. It's really your choice. It's your money. It can go anywhere that you want it to. So out of the first and third party trusts, first party doesn't get to break down into standalone or testamentary. It doesn't get to break down into revocable versus irrevocable. These are all types of third party trusts. So standalone versus testamentary. A standalone third-party trust means that you make it right now, and it's like making a business. When you finish signing the papers, it exists as its own separate entity. And so other people can actually put money into it. Like I said before, the stranger off the street, or grandma or grandpa or your cousin, anybody can put money in. Testamentary means, well, you've made your plan for when you pass away, how you want all of your assets to pass. And when that happens, your special needs trust is created at that time. So people can't put money into it now because you're not dead right now. When you do pass away, then it exists, and other people can put money into it then as well. But that's the difference there. Standalone, it exists right now. It gets its own tax identification number and everything, and it has to pay its own taxes. So most of the time I see testamentary. We make your plan. When you pass, the plan takes over caring on your behalf, and then it gets funded. But that also has its own drawbacks. Because what if we hit a situation where someone's made their plan and then they have dementia, or they have Alzheimer's, or any other kind of condition that means that they cannot manage the care for their loved one anymore? Well, the special needs trust doesn't exist yet. Just because you've lost capacity doesn't mean you've passed away. And so your testamentary plan doesn't kick in. So people will have to be kind of working around the edges and using things like a power of attorney, or if you've made them your trustee, using your trust for the benefit of their special needs sibling. It can be a bit messy that way. So there's pros and cons to both kinds of trust, and it's really something you have to discuss with your attorney what your situation is. And the last one is revocable versus irrevocable. So replace those words with changeable and unchangeable, and it gives you a clearer picture. That's just the legal jargon that we use. So changeable means that if you want to edit the terms of the trust, you can. You can say, well, I didn't want any of the money going to this other child of mine ever in the future, but now you've reconciled. Okay, great. We can go in and we can change the trust and say, when your loved one who meets that definition of disability passes, the reconciled child now can have a share where they couldn't before. Irrevocable, unchangeable means, nah, you might have reconciled with that child, but anything that you want to give them cannot come through that special needs trust because you've made it unchangeable, irrevocable. So you cannot alter that again in the future. So hopefully that makes sense there. There's a lot of reasons why you may or may not want to do one or the other. Some of it involves tax. So I'm not going to get that into the weeds tonight because, again, I could do a whole presentation on that on its own. So let's go ahead and talk about how it's made. Big red banner on this one. You heard me harping on it already. Don't make your own trust. Work with an attorney on this. I have seen enough mistakes from even attorneys who thought they knew what they were doing on making a standard estate plan. And they were general practitioners, not estate planners. I've had to clean up those messes in probate court. It isn't fun. Please make sure that at the very least you work with an attorney and talk through your needs. And if they're not a good fit, find another one. Nothing wrong with that. But don't try and do a special needs trust on your own using any kind of software that you find online. I have a family member, a couple, who will remain unnamed, who were so proud that they'd gone and they'd made their own estate plan online. They live in Columbia, Missouri. They came to me, they showed it to me, and they're like, look what we did. Aren't you proud of us? And I had to say, guys, did you look through it? And they said, yes, we were very careful. Then do you see this line where it says valid in the state of Arizona? You live in Columbia, Missouri. So please, I'm not totally against using online services, but you have to be very careful when you do. And in situations like this with a special needs trust, it's just not a good idea. So when you're creating the trust then and you're talking to the attorney, what are you going to be considering when you have that consultation or conversation with an attorney? What are you looking at? And it's twofold. It is funding and it is management. So when and how is the money going in, and who's in control of it once it's there? So continuity is key on healthcare, because when this transition happens where someone else is now managing the healthcare of your loved one, there's already going to be trauma involved because of your passing. Abrupt changes, I'm sure you know, are not very great for disabled individuals on how they handle things if they've got a learning disability. It can really disrupt their life. And so trying to make sure when you're developing the plan that you have a continuity of care, it's huge. It really is. And financially, you can totally break that off from the healthcare. And in fact, in many cases, you should. We talked about how not everybody's good at handling money. And there's a possibility that there's no one who is good at handling money that you know that you want to put in charge of managing this. Somebody who has to figure out how to pay all the taxes, make sure everything gets turned in on time, and make sure that they're staying on top of government benefits. And when they use money from the trust, they're not disqualifying anyone from anything. It's possible for individuals to know how to do that, but it's rare because most people are not you. They have not figured out everything that you have learned in taking care of your loved one, and they're learning all of it in a hurry. And they don't know the jargon, and they don't have someone at Social Security that they've talked to on 12 other occasions. They're starting all of this fresh. So a lot of times when it comes to financial management, I want you to consider the possibility of a corporate or professional fiduciary. So somebody whose job it is just to run the finances. They don't have to touch healthcare. In fact, they probably won't. A lot of places don't want to touch the healthcare, but they'll manage the finances. There's always going to be a fee. You're always going to have to talk to them about what their fee is and whether that's acceptable to you or not. But they will make sure benefits aren't disrupted, taxes are filed on time and appropriately. It's an important thing to consider, because otherwise you're placing your burden, everything that you have learned and done over the years and taking care of your child, onto an individual who may have already filled their life with their own cares and worries, their own children, their own jobs, their own situations. So it's not right for everyone, but it is an important thing to consider bringing in a professional to just run the money side of things. And when you do that, you can also give a loved one, instead of the responsibility of doing all of those tasks, you can simply give them the responsibility of overseeing all those tasks. So say you pick a bank or a trust company to run the finances. Then you give your non-disabled son or daughter or cousin or whoever else the right to say, hey, bank, show me what you've been doing. I want to make sure I agree with it. And they can look it through. And if they don't like it, you've given that loved one the power to say, bank, you're not doing your job. You're fired, and trust company, I'm hiring you instead. So you maintain that kind of a power to make sure that the job is being done well by entrusting a loved one to just review things instead of being responsible for filing absolutely everything. And that's called a trust protector, generally in this language. You'll see other terms, but it's something you need to consider. Do you have someone who you entrust to do all of this work, or would you rather find someone you trust to simply oversee all of this work. So that's the management side. The funding side, I'll be quicker on because we already touched on it a little bit. When are you funding? How are you funding? Are you doing it right now and creating that standalone trust that might have to start paying its own taxes as soon as you create it? Or are you looking at making a plan that says when I pass, everything goes to my child at that time in a special needs trust, or to my spouse in a special needs trust? Those are things you need to consider, and talk to your attorney once you've given them your whole situation. Ask them their opinion. Which one do you think would be better, and why, attorney, do you think this plan is better than that plan? So those are the first considerations. Now, I've already touched on some of this on the previous page on why not family. And I've touched on it earlier too when I said the whole spiel about Thanksgiving. I want to touch on it one more time because I've seen it put strain on too many people. Why not family? Why not put a family member in charge? It can cause a lot of infighting and resentment and accusations of mismanagement. It's a lot easier at Thanksgiving to have all of your kids sitting around the table and complain about the bank than it is to have all your kids sit around the table at Thanksgiving staring daggers at each other and arguing about what so-and-so did wrong and how so-and-so took mom and dad's money and how dare they. Let's let them point fingers at the bank. It's a lot easier. And heck, if the bank did something wrong, the bank's got insurance. We can go after the bank and their insurance and get a payment out of them. So I really stress the idea that a professional fiduciary, it's a good idea. Typically, you're going to find banks and trust companies doing this. You might find some solo attorneys or law firms that offer this. I would not trust an attorney or a law firm to do this. It is not something that they should be providing as a service. I think it's ethically pretty questionable. So avoid any attorney who says, oh, well, I'll be the fiduciary for you, unless you have no other choice. Now, the trust protector, again, we talked about a little bit earlier. Again, pick somebody who can review things, or several somebodies. If you have one child who meets that definition of disability and 2 or 3 children who don't, you can put all of them on as trust protector if you really want to. And then any of them can call the bank out and say, hey, I don't think you're doing things right. Show all 3 of us what's going on. So all considerations there on who's going to be the trustee. It's going to be a professional fiduciary most of the time because they know what they're doing. And then who's going to be the trust protector? That's going to be family, because family care more about the person who needs the care, who the trust is benefiting. Now, the next part are care plans, which are necessary things. They're very important. Like I said, continuity of care is a big thing. Legally speaking, it's a real gray area, unfortunately. Unless you can get someone to sign it as a contract, there's not a whole lot of things you can do to enforce a care plan. So what you do is you build it out and you make sure that everyone involved understands it. And so your trust protector, your family, will look after the bank, and the bank will fund where the person lives. They will fund any kind of needs that arise, even things such as going to Disneyland. If your disabled loved one wants to go to Disneyland, do it. The trust can pay for that kind of thing. But that's going to be monitored by your trust protector. Now, your trust protector, though, is much more likely to be the person who's involved with monitoring care needs. They're going to be the one going to the bank and saying, hey, we need this for sister. We need this for brother. They have old hearing aids. They're duds. They don't work anymore. We need to pay for a new hearing test and new hearing aids and get this done as quickly as possible. The bank isn't going to send somebody out to know that. The family member, the trust protector, that's the kind of person who's going to be monitoring the care needs and making sure they're happy. Because public benefits, great to continue, make sure they pay for everything that they can, but there are things they don't pay for that the trust can. And it might not be Disneyland, but it might be a new book. It might be an iPad. It might be a TV in their room. It might be living at home. It might be living in a group home. That is something that you need to communicate clearly with your family and your loved one, saying that, okay, your sister or brother has all of these needs. These need to be met. These are the things they like and they don't like. Please try to make sure to avoid those and make these happen. And that is making a care plan. And if you can get your son or daughter to sign a contract saying they're going to do it, I suppose we could enforce it, but that's just not likely. It's a very important step, but it is up to you to work on getting that done. Now, nope, and I clicked one too far. What happens after the trust has done its job? We talked on this earlier. Money goes to the state if it's a first party. Third party, money goes wherever you say it goes. You have made the trust. Once you pass away, no one else can change it. Only the people who made the trust can change the trust. Even if you made it revocable, changeable to start with, when you've passed, no more, set in stone. And so don't disinherit your kids who don't meet the definition of disability. Let them have maybe whatever's left. Or pretty often I see charitable giving in this situation. Maybe your loved one who met that definition of disability really benefited from SOAR or some other program. And maybe you want to give back to that program. You can have your trust say, when my loved one passes away, if there's money left, I want it to go to that organization. If there's an asset left, I want it to go to that organization. That is up to you to decide. And as long as you keep it revocable, you can change that as time goes on, where you think that money should go. Now, the next part of it is maintenance, unfortunately. And a lot of attorneys aren't good at following up on this. And a lot of clients never respond, even if the attorney does follow up on this. Every 3 years or so, you should be taking a look at your plan. You should be calling your attorney, seeing if they could set up a meeting and saying, hey, what's changed? Because I can tell you 2019 through 2022, we had so many changes in the law when it comes to estate planning. A lot of stuff, especially tax related issues, changed during that time. And we've got a whole set of laws that are going to go away as of December 31st, 2025. We hit 2026, a lot of rules are changing. We'll find out what that looks like, and maybe it won't change. Maybe with our new president coming back in, he decides that actually we don't want anything to change and we're going to stop it. We just don't know. And so it's a good idea, at least every 3 to 5 years, to go back to your attorney and say, hey, has anything changed? Do I need to come in for an appointment and look things over? Please do that. Don't let it be a one and done where you think that the trust that you made in 1990 is still good. It might get some things done, but it's not going to do everything you thought it would. Now, another thing of that is families change. Marriage, divorce, death, estrangement, adoption, new children, just in general. All of these things can radically impact your plan and what you want to happen. And so you need to be letting your attorney know when those things happen in your life. Okay, does that impact my plan? Do I need to change things? And then needs change as well. I worked with a client who suddenly got a devastating diagnosis. And he saw his daughter who got this diagnosis, and he had 2 other children who didn't have that. And he said, well, she's going to need a lot more money and a lot more care. All of a sudden, I don't need to give as much to my other kids, but I need to give more to this child. These things happen. Life changes. So I think it's worth that phone call every now and then just to find out, has Social Security changed anything? Has your life changed at all? Or have your desires changed? So that is something you have to keep on top of. Now, topics for other days, if you're interested, I can do presentations on all kinds of things. Public benefits, qualifications. I mean, what are those requirements that you have to meet or stay under? Other planning needs, because powers of attorney and guardianship are big topics here. And assets. What do you even put in the trust, and what can't you put in the trust? And what are the best things to give to a special needs trust? Used to be you never wanted to put an IRA, through to a special needs individual. It wasn't going to go well. Well, now that's who you want it to go to. That law flipped in the last 2 years, where all of a sudden you could give an IRA to a child and they could stretch it across their lifetime and pull from it their whole life. Can't do it anymore. They've got to take it out in 10 years. Doesn't matter the tax consequence, unless they happen to meet the definition of disability. If they do, they still get to take it across their whole life. So it used to be IRA to the other kids. Now it's IRA to these kids. It changes. So what assets you put in and how you designate where they go. Another thing we can talk about if you'd like. So if there's any questions, comments, or concerns, I think I've managed to leave 10 minutes, 15. Okay, I did good. 15 minutes for questions or comments or concerns. I know the big one usually is, hey, what is this all going to cost? For legal reasons, I actually am not supposed to, at educational events, talk about my own prices, but I can give you general things. And if you want to reach out to me individually, I'm always going to tell you what it costs before I ever charge you for anything. So feel free to ask me prices on a one-on-one setting. So other than that, are there any other questions, comments, or concerns?
I'll just pop in. First of all, thank you. I actually was at the last meeting and was really happy to hear this is happening now, because our special needs trust for my daughter is well over 5 years. I can't tell time after COVID. I know it was pre-COVID, well before pre-COVID. So I am going to want your information. Can you tell me where your office is?
Sure. So right now it's kind of under construction.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I'm going out to meet people wherever they want to meet until that gets fixed.
Okay. Main office is, I assume, in Missouri or Kansas City area, or?
Missouri, yes. So it's up. I'm actually with another attorney office just off of I-29. Do you know where Parkville 45 highway's at?
You are lying to me. We are in Parkville. Okay. Because the attorney we had before was technically in Kansas, but he had to have someone sign off in Missouri. And I assume he knew what he was doing. It was, we just were finding someone. So blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yeah.
I need to find someone else to make sure we did it right. And then I thought, I don't want to go to Kansas and Overland Park because, so I do believe that Jesus brought you to my life today. So thank you.
Absolutely.
And as it turns out, yes, I know where Parkville is.
Do you know where the old Kmart used to be right off of I-29?
Absolutely. Then Sears, Kmart's. Yeah.
Right by
Plaza Middle School, where my kids went to school. Yes.
Perfect.
Yes. Been here for 30 years. So very cool. All right. So we're going to talk and I won't take any more time. So, but already you've told me a lot of things that have changed that I didn't know. So I appreciate it. Yes. So solid. Cool.
Okay. And then Marilyn, you unmuted as well, it looks like.
Yeah, I was just going to thank you also for the information. It was very, very helpful. And I assume I have the opposite question of Julie. So you're licensed in both Kansas and Missouri. Okay. And you can build the trusts in either for Kansas or Missouri.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's some language that you specifically want to have because Kansas does not allow certain things that Missouri does. So
Right.
if you word it okay for Kansas on those items, it works in both states. But if you
Right.
word it for Missouri, it doesn't work in both states. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, my dad has just gone through this for my mom. She has Alzheimer's, and so they're restructuring all of that. And that was one of the things that came up in that discussion. But I don't want to use the same attorney. So I will send you an email.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
And Ryan, where did you graduate?
UMKC. So
UMKC. Okay.
I went to Mizzou. Hopefully that's not offensive to anybody here.
No, it's not.
I went to Mizzou, and then I knew I wanted to come back and work in Kansas City because my family was here. I grew up here, and I wanted to be a part of the legal community here. So instead of staying at Mizzou for my law school, I came to UMKC so I could start, meeting people, shaking hands, and being present.
Right. Yeah. Great. All right. I'll be in touch. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Fantastic.
And thank you to SOAR also.
Always.
Thank you for facilitating this. This is very necessary.
And well timed. Now I'm going to get personal, Ryan. Did you grow up around Parkville?
I grew up over in Gladstone, if you know.
Okay. And my son lives in Gladstone. Your name sounds just familiar enough. And I was in the school district. I thought, I just got to see how deep this goes. But that's
my dad was a choir teacher at Oak Park High School.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool.
So.
All right. Okay. So I've got your number down, and if I don't have your email right, but yeah. This is fantastic. So yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Ryan.
And if you want to put your little thing back up, there it is.
I put it in as the last slide as well, so it could pop back up.
My flash kept going off, and so I'm sorry for that.
No problem. No problem.
All right. Well timed. Amazing. Cool.
Well, thank you both for being here tonight.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you again soon, it sounds like. Doc, thank you again for having us here tonight. And I'll talk to you all again soon.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. Bye-bye.
The other thing, too, I'll just throw out for everyone is, we're looking to have more. We'll have this every month. And so if there are topics you are interested in having, let us know. Or if you have a potential speaker, let us know. We'd love to know. So just let us know. Email us. Amy's the one in charge of this. And we want to find out we want to have talks that are meaningful for you. So this is one that we've had people definitely be letting us know about. So just let us know and we'll get it all set up. But otherwise, we want to wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving and hope you all enjoy with your families. And then we are taking off for December. We will not have the Caregiver 411 because that lands on Christmas. So we are wanting everyone to spend time with their family. So we also want to take a minute and just wish everyone a very Merry Christmas. But we will start back up again in January. So we'd love to know your thoughts and we'll get everything set up.
SOAR is definitely a hidden gem in the community. And they're kind of like, if no one else can tell you, SOAR will take it on. So I like SOAR a lot.
We love hearing that, and we're trying to change us being a hidden gem. We want to be
a
well-known gem.
I wanted to ask you, and this may be too specific, but we are grandparents setting something up for our disabled granddaughter. Is that still within? Is that something we can do, or does she have to be our daughter?
No, you can absolutely set that up for a grandchild. Yes.
Okay. And then there would only be one trust if both sets of grandparents were contributing, or would there be two trusts?
That is up to you, actually. So if you want the same thing to happen and you agree on all the details, then there only has to be one.
Yeah, but that's way too hard. That's working way too hard. We're looking at something that's going to be used 40, 50 years in the future. Right. I can't look at. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I will say I'm 2 for 2 on success with my meetings, so 100% so far. Hold on.
All right, just us now.
All right. Well, we'll call that a wrap and see you next time. Happy
All right.
Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, guys.